Okay, hello everybody, and welcome back to a new episode of Conversations with Amoda. It's been a while, but we're delighted to be back having a conversation. So let's explore Amoda. We've decided that the working title of this is Do You Need a Guru to Awaken? The subtitle is Osho, Transmission and the Field of Love. Today, we're exploring a question that has echoed through the centuries of spiritual seeking. Do you need a guru to awaken? Throughout history, seekers have gathered around teachers, mystics, masters, drawn by something intangible, something alive. Amoda spent time at the Osho Ashram in Pune in the years after Osho had left his body. Immersed in his teachings and the field that remained. In this conversation, we explore her experience there, the role of the guru, the power and danger of projection, and what it truly means to awaken. Is the guru a necessity or a mirror? And what is the true source of awakening? A lot of things to explore with you. So let me just start with these couple of questions. Do you actually need a guru to awaken? Is awakening, in fact, dependent on another? Or is it always within oneself? So,
It's always within oneself and is in fact not dependent on anyone nor on any circumstance. However, being in the field of awakened consciousness can support that awakening. Do we need a guru? It depends what we mean by guru. The word guru conjures up someone who's reached some exalted state upon which we may project perfection. And this creates the danger of dependency. It creates the danger of worship. It creates the danger of elevation. And in that dynamic, awakening becomes out of reach. If we mean guru by someone who's awakened, truly awakened, and is able to mirror that back, reflect that back to at least to the field around him or her in which individuals come in, then there is value. So the problem isn't necessarily in the guru, in the spiritual teacher, although it can be. There can be power dynamics that go on in which, those that are seeking awakening remain dependent. But it's more in the eyes of the perceiver. It's in the eyes of the seeker. If the seeker comes with a projection of Mother, Father, God onto the awakened one, then that can remain as a imbalanced dynamic. So do we need a guru? No. Can we, if you like, be available for a reflection, a clear reflection of that which we truly are? Can we be in a field that allows unconscious, let's say, ego patterns or ego identities to surface and be reflected back? Yes, we can.
It's an interesting question, I must admit. So, taking what you pointed to, let me just ask this: is there a difference, do you think, between, at least in the perception of it, a difference between a guru and a teacher?
Yes, I think that's what I was partially touching on. I think the perception of a guru is one of the elevated, perfect other, the one that can bestow upon us the grace of awakening. And that keeps the dynamic out of balance, because then there's dependency upon the guru. There's also a projection of perfection. And in that, there can't really be clear seeing, nor taking full responsibility for looking within. So I think, yes, in the perception, a teacher, a master, are terms that are less prone to projection.
So the term is actually the sort of mental picture or the energetic picture that somebody may inadvertently have of the guru that sets them kind of one step above. And
Yeah, I
that
mean,
projection,
it's tricky, isn't it? Because
it is.
to have the humility to be with a teacher, let's use a modern day term, to have the humility to have a certain degree of surrender, not surrender to the other, but to that which is being reflected, is a necessary part of the path. But if that comes with a sort of childlike dependency, then that's also an impediment. So it's a tricky thing. Ultimately, we don't need a guru, because awakening isn't given to us by anyone, however enlightened they are. It's only to serve the realization of that which is already here, and that which stands in the way of it.
Has that, before we move on, because I want to get into the more personal, in a sense, understanding or exploring your experience. But I want to know what you feel about whether there's, as the seeking or searching for enlightenment, awakening has filtered over into the West more and left behind just some of the austerity, maybe, or some of the cultural image or ideas that we've inherited or were in India, maybe, for a long time. As it's come to the West, has this relationship, or do you know what I'm trying to dig at? Is like, has that shifted somewhat?
Again, there's no, if we look around, there's no sort of black and white to it. There's a whole array. Yes, it has shifted, and no, it hasn't shifted. There are those who follow a kind of teacher, guru, whatever, that has a much more of a archetype of the Eastern guru type, and there are those who, in a more contemporary way, will receive teachings or be in the close environment of a contemporary teacher that
Yes.
don't have that. So there's a whole array.
Okay.
Um, one of the sticking points of the traditional model, let's say, is that it creates, well, first of all, it creates that disparity of there's the all-powerful one, the all-knowing one, and I'm dependent upon that one in order to know myself, in order to feel loved. And then there's this kind of specialness that takes over in following that particular guru, in getting it right. And all this just plays out into, in some ways, family dynamics, mummy, daddy dynamics. And that's where it becomes, in some ways, unhealthy or unwholesome. And that's not often seen. And then the guru lets us down, and then we're disillusioned, and nothing's really changed. So that can go on. When that archetype isn't carried over from the East and it's much more contemporary, then there's a more open kind of meeting that can take place. Again, the awakened one, the one that has realized true nature in a very ordinary modern day form, not playing the guru archetype, does have something to offer. So there must be a certain humility in the face of that. But there's also a much more direct meeting that takes place. And then in between all that are all shades of grey.
Yeah, there really are. Yes. I hear you use the word contemporary quite a bit in a way to describe or at least point to some aspect of your teaching of what is offered here for that very reason. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
It also comes with its own, everything comes with its own sort of set of assumptions, projections, ideas, imaginations, doesn't it? Really. So let's go into your own journey, because some of what you've seen, felt, experienced has informed your own, your own, understanding or awareness. So what drew you to Osho's teachings, even after he had left the body? Yeah. Were you, like, for instance, were you seeking a guru? Were you seeking anything? Were you running away? Were you, what were you, what was this?
I found myself at the ashram in Pune almost by accident, although there are no accidents. I wasn't seeking a guru. I certainly wasn't. Um, it's never been my particular trajectory. Um, I didn't even know who Osho was, and I just ended up through someone's encouragement, because I was into meditation, to go and visit this place. I was traveling in India. So that's how I ended up there, or started my journey there. Was I seeking anything at that time? Uh, in some ways, I simply wanted to be free of pain. I carried I was quite young then, so I carried a lot of emotional pain from my past, um, a lot of pain in relationships. I was young, I didn't really know myself. Um, I was seeking happiness, freedom from my own suffering, but it wasn't a seeking of a philosophical truth. It wasn't even a seeking of awakening. It wasn't, but there was a deep search for the reason for existence, the meaning of existence, for going beyond surface reality. I think that was, there was something more that I couldn't put my finger on, more than the everyday, you get a career and a family and you settle down and you get a home and all of that kind of uh, attention to worldly matters. I wanted to find or discover something more meaningful than that. And it wasn't from doing something, but somehow from knowing something. But it was pretty unformed in me. So I was a meditator. I tried many types of meditation. I did go to many Buddhist monasteries and retreats in England. It gave me great peace and a certain coming home, but that's as far as it went. And then I found myself in Pune, and and in Pune they didn't make a big thing of Osho worship. It wasn't like that. There were no photos of him. There were no, there was no idolatry. There were a lot of different methods that went on, as they called it, the multiversity. And you could, take part in any of those. And there were a lot of active meditations. And in the evenings, there'd be a discourse on a big screen by Osho. But other than that, it wasn't, well, to me anyway, it wasn't in my face, follow the guru. But something was there. Something touched me. I was only there for a short while. And then I couldn't understand a word that was being said in the discourses. I didn't return for maybe, I can't remember now, maybe 3 or 4 years after that, maybe even 5 or 6 years after that. But when I did return, it was a conscious choice.
Why did you return then?
Something pulled me. I had taken on the active meditations. They really had touched me deeply and started to open something up. I was already into movement and breath work and meditation, so somehow the combination of that really made sense to me. And so I was already practicing some active meditations, and I felt to go and immerse myself in that because I still was in a lot of pain. I was still in a lot of turmoil, I should say. And I wanted to, I carried a lot of fear and insecurity and self-doubt and self-consciousness, and something nudged me to go there. I didn't know what I was going to do, or there was no real conscious, path to it. But I thought I'd just go and be there for a number of months to see what would happen. Of course, when I
I
got
think
there, everyone was going to see Papaji.
you were off to see the other guru.
Yes, I didn't go. There were many sannyasins getting in a coach saying, come on, we're all going to see Papaji, and this is the one, and something made me just stay in Pune.
Is that, do you think, because you I mean, Osho had already left his body by the time you arrived, and do you think that was in a way significant for you, and is that significant
Again, I don't really know, but I think for me, yes. I've never been a follower. I've never been a guru follower. Um, Maybe I would have been if Osho was in his body, but I didn't have that desire. So to have it as a more impersonal um, doorway was just perfect for me.
Mm.
I did end up, if you like, falling in love with the frequency field that was catalyzed by Osho, but it was not about the form or you know, the human being and, the personal. I think I've come to appreciate that many years later. At the time, it was the impersonal field that did something over time.
So let me ask about that, because what I sort of hear in what you're saying, some of what you're saying anyway, was the active meditations, the field, and the active meditations was offering you something, and it was indirectly or directly in a way Osho, but there was something behind, something inside these active meditations that was facilitating a deeper letting go, catharsis. I don't really want to use that word, but I did. A sort of energy release, or something deeper was happening to you. Was that your experience?
It was. One of the first things that happened when I got there, because I wanted to try all the meditations, and they're not all active meditations. There were many Zen, meditations. Sat all night under the moon, absolute stillness, and someone came and popped you on the head with a stick. Um, so there was a lot of that as well, and other meditations that weren't active meditations, cathartic meditations. And I just wanted to immerse myself in all the meditations. And one of the first things that happened, within the first week I was there, I had some kind of, I can't remember what it was. It was a session of some kind. And she said to me, and this was in the ashram, one of the sannyasins, one of the facilitators, and she said, you know meditation. You've been a meditator for lifetimes. Now it's just embodiment. And I didn't really know what she meant then. So I just went on my way and tried everything. And I think that the active meditations, the cathartic meditations, were the vehicle for the embodiment, in the sense that they just energetically undid the layers that were obscuring my true nature as open awareness. I kind of knew open awareness. They're not words I would have used then, but it's like meditation as in open awareness, I could enter very easily. It wasn't a struggle for me. So it's as if it was a very familiar place, which is why I was drawn to it. But there were layers of self in the obscuring that. And the energetic meditations very quickly undid those layers of self. So all that was left was this great openness. And that openness allowed me to meet life just as it is. I mean, I wouldn't say I reached enlightenment there, but it set a trajectory, unbeknownst to me, because I wasn't seeking it. But it started very powerfully the living as surrender, living without resistance to what is. Because I went straight back to London, in the heart of London, where it was tough, and I was in a tough situation. But something had shifted. The resistance to life had fallen away. And that seeped in over a number of years.
Do you think that some of that was was essential, or was fundamental in the teaching, if you like, the transmission of Osho? Is that integral to what he's teaching? I mean, I know we don't want to get involved in the story, the narratives, the projections, the nonsense, the endless stuff about Osho, because we're talking about something sort of much more in a much more soft, intimate, true way. Because there was something fundamentally liberating in Osho. He didn't tick the boxes of the regular guru in so many different ways, and some of them extremely controversial in the opulence and the da 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 da. But a lot of people still to this day get a lot of stuff from Osho's fragrance, and you tasted a lot of that, and I know, and so did I eventually through you, and it was very powerful.
Yes, it's so difficult to put into words because Osho never spoke in the way that contemporary teachers speak, where the ego is unpacked, even the way I speak, where the
Yeah.
mechanism of the ego is unpacked, where pointing to awareness as your natural state. This is not language that he used. He was much more um, radical than that, and spoke about things. But the methodology that came from that, which his facilitators that grew around him used, enabled many to be free of much of their conditioning. And that's surely the foundation of awakening. To be free of conditioning, to be energetically unarmored. I mean, many did awaken around Osho, and many didn't, because it was very unconventional in that way. But I think that all sannyasins, as a generalization, true sannyasins, have been touched by, as you say, a fragrance that I certainly haven't experienced anywhere else, except in myself now. But a fragrance of such a potent, unconditional love. And again, it's not personal, it's not love from Osho, although it probably is as well, but I wasn't in direct relationship with him in that way, or interaction with him. But in the field around him, there was such a deep bond of humanity. We were allowed to be, if you like, totally human, not with a spiritual cloak. Spirituality was totally dismantled, and yet it was deeply spiritual. All I can say was I didn't expect anything. I wasn't looking anything. But the day that I left, and the day prior to that, I had taken sannyas and I hadn't intended to, was absolutely as if I had been turned inside out and born again. I didn't really know it at the time. It's only as it settled that, and even many years later, that there's a realization. But I came away I came away knowing, but not in an intellectual way, but energetically knowing that I am love. That all there is love. And that the eye that sees is just a singular point within that field of love and inseparable from it. And again, I'm using language that I have now, which I didn't have then. what can I say? It is such a wordless place. Whatever words one wants to put on it are insufficient. But and then for many years, as you know, we've both gone on our journey, and I've gone on my journey, and I've never referenced Osho, and I've never, even to myself, it's just something that happened, and I've moved on, and I'm not attached to anyone or anything or any place. But there has been a deep appreciation of that recently, as the field of love has revealed itself more and more in our own teaching. It's like, oh, well, that's it, isn't it? Maybe that's what it was all about. And maybe that's why I was in Pune at that time, because somehow that field of love has grown its body within me. It's grown its body within this relationship. And now it's growing its body within the Sangha that's around us, dare I say. So it's kind of, wow, what happened?
I 100% completely concur and see that in you. And, what was it? Miten wrote that song, or is it Totally Wild and Absolutely Free? And he sang, if anybody ever needs to hear in musical form the reverence and fragrance of Osho, listen to Miten, and I thought Miten was cheesy when I came to him as a sort of ex-cynical rock and roller. And then after about 2 or 3 years, it broke me open completely. I have to say, it broke me open completely, because I didn't think there was that sort of such a love of this thing that is no guru and yet has qualities of guru. This incredible fragrance coming through Osho into Miten and the sannyas. Some of the most exquisitely beautiful people I have ever met in my life have been sannyasins, enlightened or not, because they love you. They love
That's
you, and
right.
they're
That's it.
open, and their open-heartedness just kind of goes, my God, when you hug a sannyasin, you're going to just melt. There is nothing you can do, because the whole thing is
Absolutely.
about dissolving resistance.
That's it. This, I mean, we don't hang around sannyasins because they're just not happen not to be in our field. But yes, there is that. There's no barrier to a human intimacy. There's a deep recognition of the love in you that is in the love in me, that is, that is love. There's no spiritual hierarchy. There's no spiritual. What I loved about Osho and what happened around him was it wasn't about spiritual principles. Do this, do that, you must act this way, you must believe these. It was undoing of all belief systems, undoing of all social mores. Yeah. That's why there was a lot of controversy. But yeah, absolutely free, absolutely wild. But in that wildness is love. It's
Yeah.
not, there's no harm to anyone. There's no, it's so beautiful and very, yeah.
I mean, listening to you speak, excuse me, and knowing you real well, I would say that Osho, your history is very deep, very nuanced, and in a way, there's an inevitability to the whole journey for you. But I would say that that meeting with Osho's fragrance lit something and opened something in you that then set you on the path, if you like, for then what the subsequent awakening that you had. You, they're all part of the same continuum. One has to realize with awakening, usually there is some kind of continuum going on, because we're continuum based as human beings, right? So everything sort of moves into in the river. So I do think that happened for you. Is that your that's
I
your
do
feeling,
think so.
isn't it?
Again, at the time, I didn't know that. I'd left Pune behind and I'd gone back to London and I was doing my own thing. And it was many years later. So I couldn't, put a causal line between things. But certainly from this perspective, absolutely. Like I said, it was from that point on when I returned from Pune, there was absolutely no resistance. It was just a deep surrender to the flow of life as it moves through me, and that kept on um, deepening or refining itself until one fine day, in the midst of inner darkness, it was almost like the final surrender was being invited. Um, so yes, there was a kind of river, a river that ran through all that.
So moving on from that, in a way, the externalization, because this in a way points to, we mentioned Papaji, there's Muji, contemporary, the old, Osho, but these are all external gurus that mirror maybe something within us. So let's just move inwards a little bit and see what happens with that, because I've got this phrase here: the real guru is the light of awareness within you. Any outer teacher is only pointing back to that. So I just want to throw that at you, and let's explore that. Let's go into that, more into that kind of thing.
Well, that's where the attachment to the guru, the attachment to, or the dependency on being in the presence of the guru, the teacher, the master, whether they're contemporary or not, becomes an impediment. Again, it's a fine line, or a tricky line, because it's easy to walk away, to turn your back when when the fire gets hot.
Very
Yeah,
good.
I
Very
don't
well
need this
said.
anymore. I don't need this
This
anymore
is a fake
because,
guru. I
yeah,
don't. Yeah, we've had that.
they said the wrong thing, or they shouldn't have spoken to me like that, or can't they see who I am, or I haven't received the approval or love, and this can be conscious or unconscious, and it's easy to walk away. And in today's culture of uh, spiritual teachings, retreats, workshops, satsangs, you can go anywhere, online or offline. It's easy to just say, well, that didn't work for me, or that's not the teacher for me, or I don't like that teacher because of whatever, or I wasn't accepted in the way I wanted to, or wasn't recognized, and just walk away, and you've missed a whole opportunity. So one has to be quite delicate with this. One needs to sit in the fire of truth and stick with a teacher. But to stick with a teacher without dependency, there's the conundrum, there's the paradox. To stick with a teacher until all unconscious, subconscious dynamics have dissolved, and you're left with naked, the nakedness, I should say, of your true self, the nakedness of being. And then you could still stay, because there's something more that takes place in the field. It's one of bond, deep bond, deep friendship with others that can give rise to something. Um, but to not use it as a crutch, to not use it as a hiding place, to not use it as an escape from the world, to be able to walk in the world as the nakedness of being, whether it means going to a spiritual retreat, being with a spiritual teacher, or being in your everyday life. I can't remember what your question was, but
Well, only really about the real guru is the light of awareness within you.
yes,
And
yes,
so what we were trying to sort of unpack, I think, in a way, is exactly what you're pointing to, the nuances of it. And I think You are absolutely right, because we are, in actual fact, living in very nuanced, delicate, and in many ways difficult times, because access to teachers is everywhere, but distraction level is everywhere. And in order to, deep in the way that you're talking about, in order to uh, surrender in the way that you and I talk about, something has to, something you have to sit, you know. And unfortunately, that's that edge, that discomfort edge, when it's met with, because my experience of teachers is usually, you know, from Irina Tweedy with her Sufi master, or Nisargadatta or Papaji, you know, they were pretty hard hitting. My teacher in Wales, he was pretty hard hitting. And in a way, you know, 20 years later, with all of the choice, might be easy for me to say, I don't like that. That's a bit too uncomfortable for me. I'm off. And then you go to somewhere else. This fine line,
Yes,
which
it's
is,
a
you know,
fine line.
just to end my diatribe on that, is that I feel that that's where this fragrance of love comes in. That's what
Mm.
the field of love is. And that's why it's so, you know, I don't know, the fragrance is so compulsive or so beautiful, because it does
Yes.
hold that a lot.
Mm. I just want to pick up on what you said about surrender. You just mentioned surrender, and that highlights something, that the sitting with, or sitting in the fire of a sangha or a spiritual community, or whatever, even just a singular retreat, whatever it is, the surrender isn't to anything.
Mm.
It's not to the teacher. If there's an idea that you have to surrender your will to anyone, enlightened or not, that's not it. But there is something that happens in the fire, let's call it, which is the surrender of the self, not to anyone, not the will of the self, but the surrender of the self that needs love, the surrender of the self that needs approval, the surrender of the self that needs to control anything, to control life, the surrender of the self that needs spiritual knowledge, the acquisitive self. It's that is invited, or is possible to be surrendered in the field, and is not so possible in the everyday matrix of life, because it doesn't invite that. So that's why it's important to stick with it, but not to mistake that for surrender to the guru or to the community, where I have to do what they say, and act in a certain way, or follow the teachings in a certain way, so that I can be included, so that I can be approved of. No, that's the old way. So we have to understand what surrender really is. And a true teacher, a true master, will, not by doing anything, but simply by their very being, it invites that surrender. It can't help itself. Not the individual, not the person, but the field itself invites that surrender, because everything else
So
is not love.
yeah, so look, I'm going to ask the the difficult question. So, how do you see your role as spiritual teacher, given particularly the movement of this conversation in the last 5 minutes? You specifically, Amoda as well, not just some, not asking you as a spiritual teacher. I'm asking you specifically in a way.
How do I see my role in this?
Yeah, what are you doing?
Well, the difficulty of the question is I don't self-reference in that way. I don't see myself as anything. I don't see myself through the eyes of a role. as such, although there's obviously something taking place. That would be ridiculous to deny it. But uh, if anything is taking place, it's that which we've just spoken of in the past 5 minutes. There's a invisible, intangible, yet potent, and we only know that, or I only know that because of feedback. I don't mean feedback about me, but about what's happening in others. Um, Field, frequency, vibration, call it what you will, maybe transmission, but it's not a transmission from one to another. It's just a transmittive field, like a radio frequency, that takes place when one is without agenda, without resistance, without, and when I say agenda, that includes any power dynamics, any um, unconscious needs, any hooks. When there is a clear vessel, a clear consciousness, as clear as it can be in human form, then there is this quality of unconditionality, which brings us back to love, unconditionality that is impersonal, that seems to do something, seems to touch the unconscious field in another and bring it to light so that it can be purified in that light. Now, that's not done by design, or certainly not my design. It might be God's design, but it seems to be what happens.
Yeah, I wonder what that is really. I wonder really what that is, because I absolutely agree with you and see it and feel it. It's tangible in our retreats and probably in other people's retreats on a certain level. It's a tangible quality that you feel this allowance, this relaxation on a level beyond mind that goes almost it's like it's okay. Something is deeply okay here. Something is deeply allowed and welcomed here. And just that's not coming from any, like you say, agenda. It seems to be implicit. There's something, it's almost like when we say field, it's accurate, isn't it? It is a field that's not, it's not developed by a human being. It's got no intention in a certain way. That's mysterious, it's very, very
It is
beautiful.
mysterious, yes.
But it is also the one, let's say, in this instance, it's you. In the other instance, it was, Osho. There's lots of this in many ways. And in Osho, it had his 70s wildness. And I mean, he was a tantric master in many ways. So there's a kind of different flavor. You're a woman. It's got its own shade. It's got its own, way of being. It's certainly incorporated on a deep level some of that fragrance of Osho. And so what I'm saying is the field is facilitated by the teacher, not facilitated in a conscious way, but it is the one teacher has said yes, has given themselves to it in a sense.
Yeah. Yes, it seems to be that as individuations, we're like an acupuncture point in the field. Most people don't recognize that field. They believe that we're just individual pieces of matter and in between is a load of space or a load of stuff or whatever, but there's actually a field that we're attempting to describe, and I'm sure that physicists might be able to speak of it more accurately. um, But as individuals, yeah, manifestations that we see and feel and touch, and yeah, we seem to be like an acupuncture point in that field. And that acupuncture point, when it's clean, when it's clear, what we call awakened, but when it's pure, has a certain ripple effect. And it's that ripple effect that impacts other points in that field. Now, that acupuncture point could also be one of great harm. Somebody who's doing harm in the world, somebody who's, yeah. So that's the kind of what happens. So yes, it does emanate from that point, whether it's dark or light, or and it's not done by design. It's done because that's just the way it is. Everything's connected in that way. There's something beyond the individuation. We don't just stop at our skin. It ripples out, not so much in our actions, although it comes through our actions, but just in our very essence.
I think what I, want to just say to you, and I love speaking so beautifully to you. I always have done. The thing about the word guru is usually that it's masculine, and the thing about the word guru is it comes with a whole lot of suspicion. It really does, just because of the history, because of the endless guru having a shadow that comes out here, there, and everywhere. I'm not talking about Osho. I'm not talking about anybody. I'm just talking about actually the fact of the matter that's kind of some of what's happened. Sadly, really, because there's nothing worse, I think, for a true seeker than to be let down in a certain way by the trust that is necessary, not just in a guru or a teacher, but actually in the field around them. And for that to be violated is not good. That is a terrible thing. But coming back to the positive, in my experience of you, is that there's no funny stuff at all. I really mean that, and I have to say that because we don't, we live in a world where it's all funny stuff in the politic world, and that everybody's suspicious now of everybody else. And, even we get it on the YouTube thing, oh, the fake guru, stuff like that. And I have to say, in my own experience of this incarnation, that I find your fragrance and teaching to be very, very true and very, very honest and very, very pure in a sense, not pure as an overlay, not pure as an idea, not pure because of something that you're doing, teaching, saying, or anything like that, but actually because of something kind of inside you. And I don't know what that means. And it feels unusual. And I think when I fell into deciding on a certain level that there was no other choice in this life but to serve that, not serve you, but to serve that pure love somehow, then something deep fell into place and this field started to open. It was open anyway, but we sort of, do you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Mm.
so because the fact is we do live in a very cynical, harsh, tough world where everybody gets easily to be fuddled. And I think a lot of the spiritual seekers do want to trust deeply, do want to open deeply. We get hijacked by the idea of enlightenment, awakening. But actually, love is really what we want. Unconditional love is what we really, really want. And it's not complex. And the guru has taken that on a journey somewhere, and whoa, Neddy, bring it back down, and I feel that in your honesty in what you're doing.
Yes, I don't know how to respond to that. Uh, either through the process of awakening, which I would have hoped would be the same for all awakened individuals, or through something innate in me. I don't have a personhood aspect of me that wants to claim anything, that wants to take ownership in terms of the image, the status, the power dynamic. And that filters right down to everything. You know, I won't dress like a guru. I won't act. Do you mean I'm just myself? Um, uh, uh, Maybe that's come from my time in Pune. Maybe it's something innate, but I just don't have that, and I find it almost perplexing. Although I understand the psychology of it and the dynamics of it, but on another level, on an innocent level, I find it perplexing how someone who is awake, truly awake, can still have those power dynamics. To me, that's not awakening. How can you truly awaken out of the personhood, out of the ego identity, if there are still these hooks and sticky places and and all of that goes on? Because then there's still a need. There's a need for power. There's a need for, well, it's all power, isn't it? Whether it's to do with money or recognition or sex or all the things that can happen in a spiritual cult community. Well, then that's not awakening. To me, that's not awakening. It's partial awakening. The whole thing, the whole edifice must come down. And that's how I experience myself, other than the fact that I still have a body and take care of it. And of course, there's a human being.
Is this a certain two things? I don't want to touch on this too much, but is it uh,
Excuse me, that was our dog.
is that do you think because maybe has something to do with the fact that you're a woman, and also has to do with the fact that you are actually and always have been very holistically embodied?
I don't know if it has anything to do with being a woman. Maybe it has, but then I know that women can also have those dynamics,
Yes.
spiritual or otherwise. I think it's perhaps easier for a woman because her natural essence is surrender, but not necessarily, because the ego identity can be very, rigid as well. Um, and then there's the need for love, and so on, and there's a kind of possessiveness that takes place, a possession of the sangha, possession of my followers. So maybe it has. I do have a, what did you call it? Innate embodiment.
Yes, innate
Yeah.
holistic kind of
Yes.
embodiment.
Yes. Yes. I find it strange when somebody says that it's not embodied, but of course it is. How can it be otherwise? It's all
Yeah.
one thing. It's not separate. The body's not out of the picture. It's all of it. Embodied just means truly living it in every aspect of life.
Okay. So closing remarks. I think
Closing
it's
remarks.
a very beautiful. I think it's pointed to the guru, the field, how Osho's active meditations and transmission, filtered into your life, into your own journey, and then and then this unpacking of what is this on this deeper and deeper level. So, what would you say in closing to this? Do you need a guru to awaken?
Ultimately, the guru is the God within, and even that mustn't be made into an image. Anything that supports the knowing of that is of value, whatever form it comes in. But all spiritual ideology, imagery, idolatry should come undone. It should be demolished. And in some ways, that's what I feel I'm here for. As well as everything else that we spoke about, to demolish those belief systems, not by doing anything, but just being myself, if you like. I also want to close, and I know this isn't just about Osho, but I am filled with a deep gratitude in this moment for his being and his willingness to stand in the fire of truth beyond society's expectations, beyond society's misunderstandings and attacks. And again, we're not talking about what happened around him, but I just wanted to honor that, because sometimes in seeing the incredible misunderstanding that has grown around him, even from the early days, it breaks the heart.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying as well. Yeah, I think that totally wild, absolutely free. I think I was a human being who was incarnated and was beyond the beyond, and nobody knew what to do with him. And he was a rebel. There's a rebelliousness, and that kind of rebelliousness that you can't quite, you can pin anything you like on it, and yet at the end of the day, that's not it either. I love that rebelliousness, because there's a liberated soul in there somewhere that has said, you can take all of your morality, you can take all of your ideas about what it should be to be this, that, and the other, and I'm going to set fire to them anyway. You know,
And I hope in some small way, and certainly not as extreme or as radical as that, that I can support others in not being entrapped by the matrix of, again, society's expectations or cultural norms or spiritual norms, to really be true to yourself.
yeah, of what it should look like or what it shouldn't look like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what it should look like and what it shouldn't look like. Never trust that. Yeah, trust something deeper than that.
Yeah.
That's what I learned. Trust something deeper than that. And that's why we do this field of love. That's why we're, immersed in that field of love, because it's trusting something deeper than that. Very good. All right, then, my lovely.
Okay.
Thank you so much for listening, everybody. We hope you've enjoyed it. And we're going to see if we can do another one maybe next month. Do subscribe if you know where to subscribe, and come and check us out on the website, www.amodamar.com. See what events we've got to offer, and do join us if you feel moved. Thank you so much, Amoda. It's absolute delight to be back having a conversation such as this with you. And take care, everybody, and namaste.
Namaste.